Hey, so I haven't done any vlogging in quite a while. I think the last time was for a class, and it was pretty much all done on a specific app that we used for that. So here I am again because I have a class that's asking me to vlog some, and this time we're supposed to do an advertisement for some books that we have read. Specifically, one Caldecott and one Newbery award winner. And so first I'd like to go over what those awards are so you have an idea what I'm talking about and what that really means. So first I'm going to do, let me see, the Caldecott medal winner. And the book that I chose actually won the Caldecott medal in, 1947. So it won the award quite a while ago. The Caldecott Award, or the medal itself, because there are also honor books, but the medal, as defined by the website, the Association for Library Service to Children, who determines what books earn that award, says the Caldecott Medal was named in honor of 19th century English illustrator Randolph Caldecott and is awarded annually by the Association for Library Service to Children, a division of the American Library Association, to the artist of the most distinguished American picture book for children. So that's what I say about it. And the 1947 honor book, or not honor book, but the medal winner book, was this book right here, The Little Island. And so you can kind of see on the cover some of that artwork. I thought this book was really compelling for a couple of reasons for that award. I would like to mention not only the art in this book, but also the genre in which it falls, because it's a picture book, but not just that. I felt like it also qualifies as poetry because of the kind of writing that's in it. So a picture book, let's see. Picture books come in various formats, including pop-ups and interactive books, and different types such as alphabet and counting books. Picture storybooks provide plot support with the illustrations. Wordless books contain few words or none at all. So, really, that means that a picture book emphasizes those pictures, and the pictures are very important to the story. In The Little Island, it's a story about an island, as you might have guessed, and it's really very descriptive. So I think the pictures are very important in making that connection, not only for young readers who are captivated by those kinds of pictures, but also for English language learners. Here's one of the pictures. And because they can see those pictures that are showing exactly what the story is talking about. On this page, I'll put it right there, it says, "There was a little island in the ocean. Around it the winds blew, and the birds flew, and the tides rose and fell on the shore." So it's showing the island and the birds and all those important things, and that can really help to make connections for English language learners or students who have other delays. Autistic students can help. It can help with them and other students who have a different kind of learning because they have that extra connection. Let's see. Also, in my text, it talks about the role of picture books in children's lives. Language and memories attached to picture books are powerful influences on the development of a love of reading and writing, and that's on page 120 in my book. This one right here, Teaching Children's Literature, fantastic book. And I think that's really important. The book I chose might not necessarily be the most exciting for kids today, but 1947, the kinds of illustrations that are in there were really exciting. It was something that you didn't see in just every book. And I know that there's a lot of stories like this one, specifically for me. You can see the name up on the top there, Scudder. That's my grandma's last name, and she was a teacher. And this is one of the books that she shared with me. And so it has a lot of memory for me. And making that connection with young readers is very important. I know I'm nostalgic when I read this book, for sure. And that's something that we want. We want that in our young readers. We want them to get excited about things and it to set them up to want to read for the rest of their lives. Let's see, I want to share some other insights from the text as well. About poetry, because I read you that section from the book, and poetry, as defined on page 140 of that same textbook I showed you, says, poetry is musical language. It skips, it sings, it tugs you with an insistent voice that rings through your head. So I really felt like that book speaks in that way, and I think part of the reason why it won the award that it did for those illustrations is because of the way that the illustrations go with that story and really bring out the poetry and make it maybe a little bit more accessible to children, because poetry isn't always the easiest thing for kids to wrap their heads around. So that can help. And let's see. I marked a lot of stuff in here because there's so many great things I wanted to share. Oh, yes. I felt like within poetry, because there are so many subcategories, you have limericks and haiku, and those are some of the ones that people are most familiar with, but this one is clearly a narrative. On page 145 of my textbook says, narrative tells stories, can rhyme or be in free verse, can be humorous, sad, or adventurous. And I think definitely this is an adventurous story, as it tells us about the island and later on about one of the visitors who goes there. But you'll have to read it to find out about that. I also have another fantastic text, Essentials for Children's Literature, right here. And in there, it also discusses the many genres of children's literature, of course. And that one on page 50 defines picture books. Picture books are books in which both words and illustrations are essential to the story's meaning. And I think I already really covered that, but, that's part of why this award is given. It's not the illustrations alone, but how those illustrations marry with the text of the book and how it supports it. Also, in that same text I just showed you, so it also says on page 84, poetry is the concentrated expression of ideas and feelings through precise and imaginative words carefully selected for their sonorous? Having trouble with that one. And rhythmical effects. Originally, poetry was oral, recited by minstrels as they traversed the countryside, sharing poems and songs with listeners of all ages. The musicality of poetry makes it especially suitable literary form for teachers to read aloud. And like I said, my grandma read this book to me, and she was a teacher, and I definitely enjoyed it very much. So if I have children in my classroom eventually of the right age, it's certainly something that I would consider sharing with them. The second book that I read for this week and this assignment, I really enjoyed. we not only had to read a Caldecott book, but we also had to read a Newbery Award book. And so I went to my bookshelf, and I found I have quite a few of them. Reading is really important to me, so I guess I really shouldn't be too surprised by that. I looked at the books I had, and obviously I was buying the Newbery Award book every single year from like middle through high school, and I've read them all. So I was really trying to look for one that I had bought but maybe hadn't read. So I had to go back, and I ended up picking to read for this assignment. Let me find out what year it was. The 1974 medal winner. So a little bit older than I am by about a decade. Still a fantastic book, and I think that's one of the really great things about this, is that books are out of time. They are something that, well, sometimes they are really for the time and audience when they're written, but then you can later on read those even that are specifically for an audience that was carefully chosen at the time when it was written. And you can have some historical perspective when you read them. And so not only was this written in 1974, but also it is a historical fiction. So I read The Slave Dancer by Paula Fox. Fantastic book. I love it. I would read it again for sure. So it won the Newbery Award, which, according to the same website as earlier, the Association for Library Service to Children, who also gives out this award, it says, the Newbery Medal was named for 18th century British bookseller John Newbery. It is awarded annually by the Association for Public Service to Children, for Library Service to Children, a division of the American Library Association, to the author of the most distinguished contribution to American literature for children. So, pretty remarkable award, not unlike the other one we talked about before. The Caldecott is for the illustrations, and this one is for the story. There have been times where a book is up for both of those, and I think it's really fantastic when a book is so highly acclaimed that it is has the chance of earning both of those. This one, not very many illustrations, so was the Newbery. As I mentioned, it's a historical fiction, The Slave Dancer, set pre-Civil War. Not too far ahead of that, obviously, during slavery America. And I really thought that it strikes a chord with the reader, because as historical fiction does, it gives you the chance to see things as someone at that time may have seen them, and can give you some different perspective into some of what was going on, and especially when one is as well researched as this one is, because that information, that good factual historical information, is so important to the story and maintaining authenticity and really the message of the story, because it's not just a story to entertain, but I felt like specifically in this book there's a message. You're supposed to really think about our history and about how people treat each other, and the changes that were going on in our country at that time. And it's a really reflective book to read. So I did want to quickly go over a couple things from those texts again that I mentioned earlier about historical fiction. So that second one I showed you, Essentials of Children's Literature, on page 166 this time, defines historical fiction. And it says, historical fiction is realistic fiction set in a time remote enough from the present to be considered history. Stories about events that occurred at least one generation prior to the date of the original publication are included in this chapter. So obviously that refers to this chapter, but it's important that obviously it's history. We don't want to write historical fiction that happens now. But this book is from an especially troubling time that, it's not always accessible to young people. They don't understand what was going on at that time in our history. It's so foreign to the way, thankfully, the way many young people are brought up today that, it can be a difficult concept to grasp. In the other textbook, it talks about that as well. Teaching children's literature in an era of standards, the first one that I had showed you. It talks about, just a second, I'm going to flip pages here. Well, it also defines historical fiction, but I think we've really talked about that pretty well already. Specifically, it has a section on slavery and the Civil War, 1800s. Civil War was in the 1860s. Like I said, this book was set just previous to that. So in the text it says, many excellent books from this historical era portray the horrors of slavery, including slave ships, auction blocks, deplorable living conditions, and the compelling desire to escape. That's on page 254. And I think that really related to this book because it's written from the perspective of a young white man who ends up being pressed into service on a slaver. And being on that slave ship, he's treated differently from the slaves, but he's also basically enslaved by being there because it was not his choice. And so we really get to, because it's written from his point of view, get to investigate his perspective and, what that was like as well. And not just slavery and how African slaves were treated, but they also mention that some European people were sold into slavery as well, and make some of those connections. And it really gives you a lot to think about. So I would certainly recommend that book. As I mentioned earlier, I would read it again. I'm going to recommend it to, if I have older students in my classroom, I'd recommend it to them. I have a couple kids of my own who are getting to an age where I think that they might really enjoy it as well. So if you're looking for something new to read, I would definitely recommend looking at the website for the National Association of Libraries. It was on my computer and the screen went dark. Hold on. Okay, the Association for Library Service to Children. There you go. Check out their website. They have lists of all the books that have earned this award since they began, or both of these awards. And you can look at those. They're all going to be fantastic books, and obviously we have a range of who they're for, because picture books are usually much more for younger children, although there are a lot of great ones that you might enjoy, even with older children or adults. And then there are the Newbery books, which are going to be usually longer books that are chapter books and a lot more in-depth. So check them out. They're all fantastic books. The awards are really prestigious, and it's tough to get them. So, these books are really the best books that are out there. And it's a great resource for finding new literature, both for your classroom, your own children, and yourself. Thanks.